Fear is the foundation of most governments. John Adams was right, except for one word. I'd get rid of most, because from ancient empires to modern ones, the story never changes. Every government knows that nothing expands their power faster than fear. Fear is the tool. It's the trigger. And fear is the weapon. It's always the excuse for crushing your liberty. So on this episode, you're going to hear warnings from founders, from revolutionaries, and from some of the great thinkers that they learned from about how fear and the promise of safety are used to justify power, silence dissent, and set the foundation for total tyranny. But first of all, before getting to that, welcome, and thank you for joining me here on the Path to Liberty. My name is Michael Bolden with the 10th Amendment Center, and this is the show for Wednesday, May 21st, 2025. Let's get right to it. The warnings did not start there with John Adams in 1776. Long before the American Revolution and the War for Independence, the dangers of fear-driven power were already crystal clear. Like, for example, from Montesquieu in his Spirit of Laws in 1748. He said, "As virtue is necessary in a republic, and in a monarchy honor, so fear is necessary in a despotic government. With regard to virtue, there is no occasion for it, and honor would be extremely dangerous." And Montesquieu didn't just stop with that. He spelled out exactly why tyrants rely on fear. It should be obvious, but here's how he put it. Persons capable of setting a value upon themselves would be likely to create disturbances. Fear must therefore depress their spirits and extinguish even the least sense of ambition. With that, Montesquieu exposed how the system is basically engineered through fear. And going back a couple of centuries earlier, Machiavelli, not squeamish about power at all, well, he wrote about what comes next. Because when fear takes root, it's the powerful who make the rules for their own gain, and well, everyone else kind of just becomes too afraid to speak out, do anything about it. He said, but when the citizens had become corrupt, this system became the worst possible. For then only the powerful propose laws, not for the common good and the liberty of all, but for the increase of their own power. And he continued with this, and fear restrained all the others from speaking out against such laws. And thus the people were by force and fraud made to resolve upon their own ruin. But the real poison of government by fear, and it is a poison because it's like a deadly disease, it goes much, much deeper than just politics. Thomas Gordon of Cato's Letters, this is in the early 18th century, he saw how it warps the soul of a people. It turns courage into cowardice and silence. And he learned his lesson and explained it from the great Roman historian Tacitus. He wrote, "The minds of men, terrified by unjust power, degenerated into all the vileness and methods of servitude. Abject sycophancy and blind submission grew the only means of preferment, and indeed of safety. Men durst not open their mouths, but to flatter." And as Algernon Sidney pointed out in his great Discourses Concerning Government, when the people are crushed by fear, they're left in this kind of a scenario, their silence isn't always agreement or consent. It's not necessarily. Sometimes it certainly is, and I think in modern times, a lot of times it is. People don't say anything about it because they want more government power. They want to be crushed. But sometimes for those of us who really believe in freedom and want liberty and hate the idea of the largest government in history ruling over us, sometimes the silence can be just a form of survival. It depends on the scenario. And here's how Sidney put it. "And those who are under such governments do no more assent to them, though they may be silent, than a man approves of being robbed, when without saying a word, he delivers his purse to a thief that he knows to be too strong for him." Now back to Gordon, because In that type of a scenario, that not everybody just goes silently into the night. There are always some holdouts. But the fewer of us that are speaking out against tyranny, the more likely the tyrants are going to be able to succeed. And so, of course, it sure makes it easier for the people in power to shut down the opposition. And Gordon pointed out here in Cato's letter number 15, this is in February of 1721, government always seeks to shut them down. And by being silent, it makes it easier to go after the ones who are still speaking out. He said, all ministers, therefore, who were oppressors or intended to be oppressors have been loud in their complaints against freedom of speech and the license of the press, and always restrained or endeavored to restrain both. And he said, in consequence of this, they have browbeaten writers, punished them violently and against law, and burnt their works, by all which they showed how much truth alarmed them and how much they were at enmity with truth. And of course, truth is treason in an empire of lies. That's how it always has been. But fear is really one of the oldest excuses in the playbook of tyrants. And James Madison pointed this out during the Philadelphia Convention, June of 1787. Grabbing more power is always wrapped in a language of security for your safety. And here's how he put it. The means of defense against foreign danger have been always the instruments of tyranny at home. The founders, the old revolutionaries, they were certainly students of history, far better students of history than most of us alive today, but we're here, of course, trying to turn that around, person by person, brick by brick, state by state, standing for the Constitution of liberty, learning about our history and about these essential principles. So Madison actually traced this tactic all the way back to the ancients. He said among the Romans, it was a standing maxim to excite a war whenever a revolt was apprehended. I mean, I can think of some modern examples of that, but that's, of course, another episode of how soon as someone with power starts getting in trouble over something they're doing, well, all of a sudden, there's a new enemy overseas. And as long as you have a war, people kind of click their heels and fall into line. So among the Romans, it was a standing maxim to excite a war whenever a revolt was apprehended. Throughout all Europe, the armies kept up under the pretext of defending have enslaved the people. Again, the means of defense against foreign danger have always been the tools of tyranny at home. Now, I realize I'm citing a bunch of original source documents on this, and I'm really just scratching the surface, but hopefully this kind of a highlight reel of essential foundational principles piques your interest and you want to learn more. And here we are at the TAC doing our best to help out with that process. After every single episode, a couple of hours after the live stream is done, we publish a blog post for each episode. Alan Mosley, my friend out in Tennessee, does an awesome job getting that organized. And in each blog post, there's a show links section, generally with the reference links in the order that I go through with them in the episode. So if you're wondering, like, hey, Bolden, where's that Madison quote from? You'll be able to find that when I get it published over at 10thamendmentcenter.com/path to liberty. Again, it's all spelled out, 10thamendmentcenter.com/path to liberty. And, we can even go further back than what Madison mentioned with the Romans. We can go back to Plato's Republic. This is written somewhere around, it's like 400 BC, maybe as late as 350 BC. This is from Benjamin Jowett's translation, and the pattern is always the same. He writes, the people have some protector whom they nurse into greatness, and from this root, the tree of tyranny springs. So the people are always looking for security, for protection. And the more you look to somebody to protect you, that becomes the foundation, the root for the tree of tyranny to grow. And of course, once the tyrant or tyrants have power, well, they can't afford to let up. And Aristotle in the Politics, this is also Benjamin Jowett's translation. Well, Aristotle explained the next move. The tyrant literally looks for scenarios to keep the people in a state of fear, because as long as they're afraid, they're looking to the leaders to protect them. And when they have to protect them, especially in emergency situations, they're going to get away with doing more things than when the people are not afraid. Here's from Aristotle's The Politics, Volume 1. The tyrant is also fond of making war in order that his subjects may have something to do and be always in want of a leader. I mean, you can apply this idea of war in regards to foreign nations. Of course, that's always shown as a threat. But in modern times, we also hear the term war used in all kinds of other situations as well. War on poverty, war on a lack of health care, war on illiteracy. So they're always in a warfare state. People are whipped up into a frenzy. And if they're waging war on something, government is using a bunch of power to defeat the enemy. And of course, well, they never actually defeat that enemy in the long run, and they just keep taking more power, more of your wealth, more of your money, and, well, more lives as well. Now, of course, the excuse is always the same. Tyrants never say that they're actively intending to crush liberty, to go beyond the limits of their delegated powers, for example. It always starts out with some kind of plausible story. And here, back to Cato's letters, this is Thomas Gordon again in letter number 7. He said, "In how many instances do we see that things which begin plausibly end tragically? People," he wrote, "have been often enslaved by princes created by themselves for their protection, often butchered by armies raised by themselves for their defense. But beginning plausibly, as he points out, often ends tragically. They always say that they're doing it for your protection, for your own good, for your safety." And Gordon gave us an example from the French. I think this is Louis XIV. He said the late French king, whenever he was going to shed the blood of his people in any wanton war, though undertaken to gratify his own lust of power or to exalt his own house, never failed to let the people know in an edict made on purpose that it was all for their good and prosperity. That is, he wrote, they were to suffer slaughter abroad, oppression and famine at home, purely for their own advantage and felicity. And at the height of the American Revolution, John Dickinson, in his Letters from a Farmer in Pennsylvania, 1767 and 1768, this is the last of his 12 letters, he saw this as kind of a psychological warfare used by people in power. He said, "Our fears will be excited. Our homes will be awakened. It will be insinuated to us with a plausible affection of wisdom and concern how prudent it is to please the powerful, how dangerous to provoke them." And this is the kind of pressure they always give us. It's always a good idea to just go along because, again, it's for your safety. It's for your own good. They use these tactics to push you towards compliance and eventually total submission. And Dickinson continued with this. "And then comes in the perpetual incantation that freezes up every generous purpose of the soul in cold, inactive expectation, that if there is any request to be made, compliance will obtain a favorable attention." And in his introduction to Aristotle's book number 5, Benjamin Jowett explained that sometimes, rather than waiting for the foreign danger to kind of show up on its own, well, sometimes they just go out and create it. Sometimes they just fake it. He said, "The cautious ruler will seek to create salutary terrors in the minds of the people. He will also endeavor to restrain the quarrels of the notables. He will need the gift of foresight if he aspires to the character of a statesman. All the propaganda, all the panic, all the protection protection, all the security. James Madison explained it always ends up the same way. Here in a letter to Thomas Jefferson in 1798, during the run-up to passage of the hated Alien and Sedition Acts of that year, he said, "Perhaps it is a universal truth that the loss of liberty at home is to be charged to provisions against danger, real or pretended, from abroad." Again, this isn't some tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theorist. This is James freaking Madison, the father of the Constitution, saying that people with power, when they want to expand their power and attack your liberty, is the result, well, they will use fear of foreign danger, whether it's real or pretended. They will literally make it up. And it doesn't take a lot of history. It doesn't take a lot of research to learn the actual truth. Fear is the foundation of government power. When the people live in fear, constitutions get totally erased. Rights get trampled day in and day out. They call it protection. They call it security. They say, well, it's going to make things better. It's always the same playbook, though. When government says it's for your safety, they actually mean so we can control you. Now, just in case you didn't already notice, this is definitely not the kind of lesson that we learn in the government-run and government-approved so-called education system. And that's a big part of the reason why we work so hard every single day here at the TAC to reach and teach more and more people with this truth, with these essential foundational principles from the founders, from the old revolutionaries, and from the great thinkers and writers that they read and learned from. And nothing helps us do this work more than the financial faith and support of our members. If you got a couple of bucks of that dirty government fiat that's quickly devaluing day in and day out, month in and month out, year in and year out, please consider throwing it our way over at 10thamendmentcenter.com/members. It's all spelled out, 10thamendmentcenter.com/members. Our membership program starts out at just $2 a month. We also have annual, 5-year, and lifetime options. No one punches above their weight class better than the 10th Amendment Center, so I'm very grateful for all of your support or any consideration you can give to joining us as a member today. But if you don't want to become a member, but you still want to help us out financially, that's totally cool, and I'm very grateful for whatever works best for you. Or if you're already a member and want to pitch in a little additional, no pressure on that, but I just want to make sure you know how to do that. You can do that over at 10thamendmentcenter.com/donate. Of course, there's a bunch of free and easy peasy ways that you can help us spread the word, primarily by triggering the algorithms of the mainstream platforms you may watch or listen on. For example, watch time percentage on YouTube. If it's a 10-minute video and you watch 10 minutes, that's 100%. But if you watch 18 minutes, that's 180%. So that's way, way better. So I appreciate you watching this as long as possible. Of course, reviews on Apple Podcasts or any other podcast platform, liking, subscribing, getting notifications, comments in the archive, all that stuff really, really helps out a great deal. I'm so grateful for your support, whether it's financial or otherwise. But I really hope you found this episode interesting. I hope it was fun to watch or listen to. But more important than anything, I hope it made you think, and I hope you learned something. Thanks again for spending some of your time with me today. I look forward to seeing you next time here on the Path to Liberty.